So it's 3:50. There were 20-something people signed up, but we do realize it's the last one of the day. And so to respect your time, I'm just gonna go ahead and get started, and as people filter in, they can filter in, if that's okay with you all. Okay, great. So welcome to What We've Learned, Career Foundations Intersecting Barriers pilot. Okay.
Yeah, we didn't have clicker, we just used the space bar.
Okay, yeah. All right, so my name is Tara Driver. I'm the Senior Career Pathways Manager at Women Employed. And I'd like to introduce my colleague.
Hi, everyone. My name is Efrata, and I'm the Program and Research Coordinator at Women Employed.
And so Efrata is going to be my buddy. She'll be checking the chat if there are any questions or anything, because we're supposed to be hybrid. So hello, online audience, if you all are there. So let's get started. All right. So who is Women Employed? So the first time I say I work with Women Employed, people automatically think, oh, you employ women. Not really. We're a policy and advocacy organization. We've been around for 51 years. We're located in Chicago, but we service the state of Illinois. And so we fight for women empowerment. We seek systemic improvements that touch the lives of women in low-income jobs and in women of color, particularly Black and Latinx women. And we approach our work through ensuring quality jobs, as well as forging pathways to economic empowerment and shifting that economic power by hopefully decreasing the wage gap. Some of the laws we've passed recently in the state of Illinois that we've had our hand in is paid time off for everyone in the state of Illinois. Pay transparency. Beginning January, we have employers have to list their salaries when they list job listings, as well as when they list opportunities internally. They have to put salaries. They have to make them transparent. We also have, we ended sub-minimum wage for tipped workers in the state of Illinois. So that began January as well. So that means that all of our waiters and waitresses and those cooks and all of that, they get minimum wages. So, and then they, on top of that, they get their tips. So those are some of the things we've done recently in the state of Illinois, as well as previous years, Pregnancy Fairness Act. So meaning that women who are in the working environment and who may be expecting can have water during their shift, or if they're working on their feet, they have the opportunity behind the cash register to have a seat and sit and do their work. So some of those are some of the things that we fight for. And yes, although our population is focused on women, we know that those benefit the family. So all of those things benefit the family. So let me ask a quick question. What tools do any of you use to help your students explore potential career pathways? And those of you in the room can answer. Those of you online, please put it in our chat and we'll read them off. So do any of you all use anything to, yeah. Okay, so you use ONET, you as well?
Yeah, and I've got on my website several options for people to use that may not be something that we specifically use, but it is.
Okay, great. So ONET and then options that are on your website for students to use. Anybody else? Anything different? Okay, anyone put in the chat what they use, Efrata?
Yes, we have one person on there who said they also use ONET.
Okay, ONET, very popular. Great. All right. So what we're going to cover in this presentation is I'm going to explain to you what Career Foundations is and who it's used, who it's for, who it benefits. We are going to talk about why we created a special version of this particular curriculum for vulnerable trauma impacted populations. How we modified the curriculum to meet the needs of survivors of domestic violence, and then what participants' journey look like through this model, as well as what we've learned from our pilot. So we started this pilot about a year and a half ago. It's winding down. We're coming toward the end of it. So although we don't have all of the data compiled, we did learn things along the way. And so we will be putting out a report on the final product of this pilot. So
All
what is,
right, so sorry,
go ahead.
just to start off, what is Career Foundations? So Career Foundations is a short career exploration course that helps participants develop a career pathway plan that leads to good jobs. And it strategically uses their current programming, so that could be adult education or workforce development, as an on-ramp. It can be used as a standalone course, an orientation component, or it can be embedded into an existing class. This curriculum is very flexible and customizable, so it can be structured as a course over a series of weeks or even into a single workshop. And then what is the Career Foundations Consortium? So the consortium is a group of adult education and workforce development organizations that we convene that offer career foundations as part of their programming. This consortium is now in its 9th year, and the collaboration we use to share best practices as well as to test and improve career foundations. And over 3,400 students have currently enrolled in career foundations through just the consortium alone to date. And this consortium will serve as an integral part of the pilot that we're going to discuss today. And then the Career Foundations Consortium mission statement. So our mission is that any Chicagoan with educational barriers to employment has the opportunity to improve their skills, transition to a post-secondary credential if they desire, and choose a family-sustaining job, no matter what organization they approach for help. All right, back to you, Tara.
Thank you. So Career Foundations actually can be taught virtually. It can be taught in person, or you can teach it in a hybrid model. And it's, as she mentioned, it's a very flexible format. It can be used in Google Classroom because it is created with Google Classroom design, but you don't have to use it in the Google Classroom. The components are the instructor guide, and that instructor guide has everything you need to teach the course and to display all of the lessons and everything that are actually in the student lesson slides, as well as student activity guide that's involved in the curriculum. So there are 3 components to that. It includes a technology integration toolkit. So if you want to embed a little bit of digital, literacy within the curriculum, you can do that as well. And it's designed for a teacher to facilitate. It's not made for independent learning because it is based on adult education, teaching and learning best practices. So it is made to be a cooperative learning curriculum. And then we don't want instructors to say, here, take this and, do it on your own, because they don't get anything out of it. We find that it's very strong in that classroom cooperative learning environment because students feed off of themselves. And then as well, as you know, adult learners can bring in their own experiences, and that's what's important. So first, we want to show you how participants kind of move through the series of scaffolded steps within the curriculum. So they start off with setting goals, doing self-assessments, based on their skills, their interests, their values, their goal setting, as well as their personalities. It's very important. And then we take that next step and we match all of that to different interests and different career sectors that they may be interested in. They learn about those local career sectors and career pathways that they can take. And then, as you see, they practice those presentation skills, that elevator speech, based on what they've chosen as their interests. And then they learn about all of the wraparound support services that they can receive, whether it's if they choose to go on whichever career pathway. And just to let you know, it is not written just for a specific career pathway. So it can be used for students who choose to go to academic career pathway, a military career pathway, workforce career pathway, or entrepreneurship. So it doesn't matter which career pathway they choose. And then, of course, once they choose that particular sector or program of study, the whole point of the curriculum is them to come out with a plan, an actual plan that gives them step-by-step guidance on what they need to do to reach their goal. So just imagine a student sitting down with a transition specialist, a career coach, And instead of them sitting in front of them saying, I want a job, they sit in front of them and say, hey, this is my plan. These are the steps I need to take. Help me get to it. So, and just to let you know, as Efrata mentioned, it's a very flexible curriculum that can be customized. You're going to hear that a lot throughout. So because we are out of Chicago, it was written in tandem with City Colleges of Chicago, which is one of our largest partners. But it's so customizable that you can use it and you can take out the City Colleges of Chicago information and embed your local community college information in the curriculum. And so these are actually the themes of the full curriculum. So they're basically 8 sequential themes. And like I mentioned, they start off with different course goals and different strategies. They talk about their transferable skills, as I mentioned, that elevator speech. We go through the City Colleges of Chicago website and teach them how to choose their focus area based on those resources that they have. But once again, you can switch that out with your local community college. And then they choose that focus area and they plan to get a job or plan to move on toward training. And then they want to create a college timeline, a pre-college timeline, if they choose to go the academic route. And then, of course, in the end, they can put together their portfolio once they complete the course and present it, and they'll have that for them.
All right, so like I said before, consortium organizations, that group of organizations that use our Career Foundations curriculum, they help us collect feedback from students about their experience on taking the course. So we just wanted to give you a little bit of a snapshot with some data to share what students had to say and what they reported back to us. So as you can see in front of you, this is 2 pie charts showing students' increase in knowledge about what would be a right career fit for them before they took Career Foundations and after they took Career Foundations. So as you can see, the increase in knowledge is about 58%. So the folks who, said they knew a lot before they took Career Foundations went up by 58%, from 20% to 6. That should say, I apologize, 48%. And then additionally, 96% of respondents also said yes to the question about, did this course make you more confident about reaching your education and career goals? And then on the next slide, we have some qualitative data, so an open-ended question. And students had to say that they understood a lot more about what programs were available to them. They felt more motivated about continuing with their education. They discovered so many different careers that they could explore. And they were just very excited and they grew in confidence about thinking about their next steps. So just to give you a little bit of a more background again about the topic of our presentation today, a couple years ago, we conducted a research study called Intersecting Barriers. And through a series of online surveys, focus groups, and interviews, we met with survivors, domestic violence advocates, and workforce development professionals to understand what challenges survivors face on their road to economic empowerment. And these are some of the challenges that we came out with regarding basic needs, work-related needs, and support services. So this pilot is we aim to be able to address 2 of the highlighted challenges on your screen, which were trauma and job seeking and job training and skill development when we were developing this pilot.
So Intersecting Barriers pilot, as she mentioned, we created this particular version of Career Foundation strictly for this particular group who's trauma impacted survivors. And we use this particular curriculum to make the adjustments. And we're going to talk about how we made those adjustments to address this particular group and then show you some of the results of that. So our pilot project consists of partners who are domestic violence survivor servicing organization, and then partners who are part of our consortium who service workforce services as well as adult education. And just to let you know, we, women employed, are not the experts in domestic violence survivors and practices. And so we reached out to our partners. We have a national partners, Futures Without Violence. We reached out to them to get input and feedback as we recreated the curriculum and developed it as well. And so they gave us some feedback on some of the ways we can make sure that the curriculum was trauma informed. And some of the things we could do for this pilot with our workforce partners to make sure that they were prepared. And so that looked like making sure that our partners, as we'll talk about, making sure that they had certain trainings and things like that. And so these are some of the steps we took. First of all, when we developed the curriculum, we divided it into 2 different parts. And the reason we did that is because the beginning of the curriculum, as we talked about survivors talking about their skills, talking about their goals, talking about their personalities, and how those types of subjects we realized and we got from our partners could be triggering. And so we figured those pieces of the curriculum should be done in a safe space. And so those parts of the curriculum were done with their DV organizations. And so we felt those particular parts, because they were already built trust with them, they were familiar with them. And so we said, hey, let's make sure those parts are done within their DV organizations. And because our DV organizations aren't experts in workforce and career pathways, we decided we're going to leave those parts of the curriculum to our partners. And so that's the first thing we did, was we divided up the curriculum. And then we wanted to make sure we included college as well as non-college career pathway options, as I mentioned. So it doesn't have to be toward post-secondary education, but it could be toward entrepreneurship. It could be, toward a military career pathway, as well as workforce training, because a lot of times there's an immediacy when it's time to get a job. So we made sure that was also included. We enhanced certain parts of the curriculum to make sure that they were relevant to survivors. And so an example we'll show you is about the financial goals lesson in the curriculum. And I'll show you how we did that. And then we wanted to make sure we set up a transition process when they ended part 1 of the curriculum and moved on to their workforce partners. We set up a process to make sure that those referrals were warm referrals. So we made sure that our partners had a specific contact person. We set up guidelines around making sure that once we transition the survivors into their second part of the curriculum, that the organizations contacted them within 24 to 48 hours or 2 business days, whichever came first. And then we wanted to make sure our partners were trained in trauma-informed care. And so we made sure all of our partners who participated in the pilot were trained in trauma-informed care. And so the intended audience, we first thought about who would be great for this particular pilot. And we left that up to our DV organizations to choose the participants. As we said, they're the experts, but we know that we know that they experienced this trauma. We know that they were a client of theirs, so they had to be a current participant in their programming. And then they had to be what we considered and what our partners told us in the response phase, meaning that they were in a position to actually think about their careers, which is very important, because of course, if you're in crisis phase and you're worried about where you're going to sleep, or if you have housing, or where your children are, where they're going to go, you're not even focused on what I'm going to do for my future, because that's an immediate crisis. And so we left it up to our partners to decide on who was quote unquote ready for this particular program. And so this is an example of talking about how we divided up the curriculum. As I mentioned, some of those, parts of the curriculum could be triggering for our trauma-affected populations. And so we were saying that discussing success stories could be triggering because, a lot of those survivors never have had the opportunity to talk about their own success. We talked about developing strategies and planning for difficulties, because those things could be also triggering because, they're in a mode where they've always been in a cycle of crisis. right? And so now you're talking about things that's coming out of that. And so we wanted to make sure that those particular pieces were done with our partners. And then, of course, setting financial goals. You're talking about a population who may have never had an opportunity to be financially independent, to have autonomy over their own money. And so we wanted to make sure that our partners knew that. And so this is an example of our financial component. And let me see. I don't know if you all can see this. I know Afrana and I are covering it, so let me see if I can move myself out of the way.
We got it.
Okay, yeah, I was just gonna say. So basically, yeah, you can see that the existing, some of the activities in the existing curriculum, we talked about your work values and your dream job and things like that. But for survivors, it was more about talking about their relationship with money, because they may have never had a relationship with money. Forms of financial abuse and recognizing what financial abuse is. And then the 4 forms of capital, and how we know how it's important to build your social capital. And so those are some of the things we changed in the curriculum as an example for those particular activities. And so this is one of the example of the skills, identifying their skills. And I use this, it's a whole bunch of skills that we have listed in the curriculum, but this is one I like to use because we find that a lot of our participants, whether they're survivors or not, we may have women coming into the workforce for the first time who decided to do the hardest job ever first and be a mom, and then come into the workforce and do an easier job. And so, you know, we talk about how the skills that they already have are transferable, and helping them recognize that, hey, you know, have to decide on how you're going to spend the money to get groceries and pay for school field trips and things like that. Well, guess what? You're managing money. That's budgeting. And so helping them realize some of the skills that they had that they may have never recognized as job skills, and talking about how they can transfer those skills into the workforce. And then this is one of the favorite activities among everybody. I don't care who takes the curriculum, identifying their values. And I say that is because we approach it in a very, very different way than most people. And so when they do this exercise, it really helps them hone in on what their values are. And what we do is discuss that, how it's related to your career pathway, your career choice. And we talk about how, you know, you want to make sure that when you're choosing your career, they match your values, right? Or say, for instance, I give an example of, you say you think you want to be a truck driver, right? And you want to drive trucks, but if your top value is spending time with family, then let's talk about how you can do that. Because that may mean you can still be a TDL driver, but you might want to choose a company or organization where you're doing short distances, right? You're not going away from home for 7 days, but you know, you may just drive locally or regionally, or you can drive a truck with a company where you're just driving for that day and you can come home at night to your family. So those are some of the things we talk about, as well as your values matching the company. So once again, if your number 1 value is family, you want to work for an organization or a company where they're not going to penalize you if you have to take off to take care of your child. Or if they have a company holiday party, say, hey, bring your family along to our holiday party, holiday celebration. So those are the types of things we teach about, looking for, and how they can match those things. And then lastly, our partner organizational responsibilities. So when we transitioned them to the second phase, we wanted to make sure that the things they needed to develop their career pathway and their guide is, you know, they had a relationship between education and training and their expected income. So when they had those conversations around financial responsibility, our workforce partners help them, you know, make those connections. And then we talk about the different opportunities and career pathways that they have, as well as revisiting their education plan. We wanted our organizations to revisit their plan, because in phase 1, they're introduced to that plan, but they might not necessarily have it complete because they haven't gone through some of the workforce parts. And so these are some of the responsibilities we ask our workforce and our adult ed partners to make sure that they have intact.
So this is a snippet of an activity in lesson 9, which we thought would be good for participants to do with a workforce organization. So again, what Tara just said, showing that relationship between education and training and earning potential. So by researching and just getting a better understanding of what this relationship looks like, students can see the efforts that they're making to take those career pathway steps can lead them to their financial goals. And then additionally, another piece of the curriculum that's in there is on career exploration. So actually going in and diving in and seeing what potential career programs there are. This curriculum was developed with City Colleges of Chicago. So there are activities in there that guides students on how to research an online course catalog. But of course, like Tara said, this can be swapped out with any other community college or training program out there. In essence, the point is that they practice how to go in and search and look up what potential programs they could enroll in. And then also, students explore support services at their chosen college or workforce training organization. So this could be tutoring, academic advising, childcare, transportation services, and financial aid, just trying to figure out and explore what additional wraparound support services are available to them to help them on their journey. And we also highly encourage instructors to plan field trips to go and see these places in person. Women Employed hosts some field trips here and there for with our consortium organizations, and there's always really great feedback and a lot of excitement when students actually go and see the facilities on campus in person. And then finally, this is just a screenshot of what our career education or training plan template looks like. Some of our partners already have a similar template, so they just swap that out. But essentially, this is the course culmination. So this is the plan that students kind of synthesize everything that they learned in the course, and they develop this and they figure out what their short and long-term goals are.
And then, so with this particular pilot, the participant journey looks kind of the same. The difference is like we said, we split up the parts. So they start off at their domestic violence organization. And then they move on to our partner organizations for their career pathways work, and for their workforce services or adult ed work. Then they can be referred to job training, whether it's community college, whether they're interested in getting a certificate or a degree. And they can go to our job centers there. But all while still receiving services from their DB organization. So they know that when they go through this process, they go to our partner organizations, they're still able to still receive the services from their DB organizations. Because as we said, our partners are the experts in that. And so we don't expect them to know how to service them in those areas. So they're still receiving their counseling and some of the support services from the organizations. And then, of course, just as in the regular curriculum, the whole point and culmination is for them to earn some sort of credentials so that they can get into the workforce or advance in their careers, or maybe go to post-secondary education.
All right, so now that we've kind of given you the background and explained how this pilot took place, we wanted to share with you what our lessons learned were. So our key findings and takeaways. So first, we wanted to share with you the demographic makeup of our initial pilot participants. We had a pretty wide range of ages and educational backgrounds, and most of our participants were women, and the majority identified as Asian, followed by Black and Latinx. Many participants were between the ages of 35 and 44 years old. And as you can see by the large blue section of the pie, many participants had a bachelor's degree or higher, and this is primarily because we had a high concentration of immigrant population with advanced degrees from their native country. So, and then the second largest category were those that did get some college, but just didn't have a degree or certificate. And then on the bottom right corner, you can see that the majority of our participants were parents of children younger than 18 years old.
And just to let you know, when we started this particular pilot, We didn't anticipate the large number of immigrant populations, but as we developed our partnerships with our DV organization, we had one DV organization who the majority of their clients were Middle Eastern or of Indian or Asian population. And then I'm sorry, yes, Middle Eastern. And then we had another partner who served majority of Asian populations. So and so with those specific demographics, that increased the number of immigrant populations that we ended up working with. Outside of our other DV partners who serve also a mixture. And so because we are in the city of Chicago, they serve a high population of Hispanic immigrants as well.
So similar to the data that we shared earlier regarding the overall Career Foundation survey responses, we have similar data to share that's specific to the participants who were in this pilot. So the percentage of participants who reported being very interested in going to college increased from 52% before taking Career Foundations to 83% after they took Career Foundations. And then on the next slide is on the same question around what would be a good career fit. So the percentage of participants who reported knowing a lot about which careers would be a good fit for them increased from 17% before the course to 72% after they took Career Foundations. And something I just want to note is that, as you can see, that red piece of the pie went down to 0% after. So that means at least they learned something. So that, you know, that's something good that came out of this. Okay, so after speaking with participants, so we did a survey. We also did focus groups at the end of phase 1, and then we did follow-up interviews as well. And we spoke with participants and the facilitators as part of our evaluation. So after speaking with participants, domestic violence service providers, and our workforce dev partners, these are some of the biggest themes that we saw in our findings. So first, the format of course delivery, whether participants did phase 1 in person or virtually, made a difference. Each format has its benefits and challenges. So for example, while virtual meetings gave participants more time convenience, they were more likely to be distracted by other factors like having children at home that were kind of interrupting. Alternatively, in-person cohorts developed stronger relationships with each other and their instructor, but participants who lived further away from the site also experienced some transportation challenges. And then the second theme was the role of the structure of the cohorts themselves. So we intended to have this pilot take place with existing cohorts of participants at the DV organization that maybe were there taking like group counseling classes or something like that. But we actually found that many of the participants in the pilots were newly created groups. So there, you know, due to this, there were some instances where participants just needed to have additional time to build that rapport and get the group starting before they could get into the, you know, collaborative piece of the curriculum. And then another theme that arose is the role of geography or the location of the DV and workforce development organizations. So our existing consortium of workforce dev organizations are all located in Chicago. And so most of them do require in-person visits, at least to do intake and to engage in other kind of programming that they offer as part of their organization. Two of our DV organizations, however, were located in the suburbs. And so there are participants who lived further away than is ideal. So that led to potentially long commutes going back and forth. Fortunately, some of our workforce development partners were able to accommodate them and offer virtual one-on-one meetings. So we were able to address it that way. But that was something that we, that was a theme, is the role of geography and location. And then finally, one of the largest themes in our evaluation finding was that we had a high population of participants who are recent immigrants. Therefore, immigration status, documentation, and language support became a top priority for participants navigating next steps on their career path.
And just to add, so throughout the pilot, we did offer our participants in the pilot stipends. And so the stipend was that if they completed the first phase with their DV organization, they received $100. And if they participated in feedback after completing phase one, they received an additional $50. Just as well as when they got to phase two, if they completed phase two, they received another $100 stipend. And if they provided feedback to Afrada and to our research, senior research director, then they would get an additional $50 there. So the total stipend was the $300 in addition to the wraparound support. So we did provide transportation assistance, childcare assistance for all of our partners. And we provided that to the organizations and let them make the assessments on their needs. And so the organization would make the assessment, oh, we have these many participants in this cohort. This is the number of participants who need bus cards or gas cards or whatever to get into the programs. Sure.
Where does that funding come from? Like to be able to help support them with transportation and childcare? Is that just funding through your organization that you can then use that money for?
Yeah, it was so the funding we got was from one of our funders. We get most of our funding is through private foundations. We don't get government funding. So it's through private foundations. And so with this whole particular pilot program within the grant that we received, that was budgeted out of the grant, just as well as all of our workforce service organizations also have funds that they're able to provide additional supports to our participants. And so when they got to phase two, in addition to the support that we gave them, our workforce organizations gave them as well. And then also to let you know, as overhead, our DV organizations, just as well as our workforce adult ed organizations, received a stipend to participate in the pilot because we do realize that this is above and beyond, and so they received stipends from us as well. And all of those funds are non-discretionary funds, so they can use them however they want. So if they wanted to choose to use for even more support for their participants, they could do that, or to support their staff if they needed additional staff, or they needed, staff had additional duties to do the pilot, they could use it for that as well.
So our evaluation's key findings were that the course was a safe, empowering space for students to have dedicated time to allow themselves to dream about and plan for their future. And then the second one was that there was an increase in self-efficacy, self-confidence, and motivation among participants. And lastly, students found the assessments and activities to be helpful in better understanding themselves and their career and education possibilities for the future. So overwhelmingly, students had really positive things to say, especially about phase one, having that time to get together in a safe space, have that collaboration, and to really work on this plan. So as we reflect on our goals for this pilot and our key takeaways, we also want to highlight some challenges we experience and things to consider when conducting a program like this one. So we want to recognize that although we had some parameters about what conditions would be ideal for participants in this, for participation in this pilot, particularly doing the Career Foundations curriculum and developing a career plan, we found that it was challenging to define readiness. So like Tara said earlier, we did ultimately, lean in on our DV service providers, our partners, to help us, figure out how to recruit for this pilot. And in our conversation with them, they shared with us that it is difficult to define readiness because of the cyclical nature of abuse. That makes it hard to determine a definitive amount of time beyond an abusive relationship or what would be considered to be out of crisis. Of course, addressing basic needs such as stable housing, access to resources for food insecurity, for example, should be addressed first before engaging in career exploration. But ultimately, it is up to the participant to have the agency to decide whether they want to participate or not. And it is essential to set realistic expectations that instability can make it increasingly challenging to successfully engage in workforce development or to be able to actualize their career goals. And then something to consider when developing partnerships like this one that we shared today is ways that the needs of the population and your organization serves may be best met. So we found that many participants were actually interested in continuing their post-secondary education or getting their existing credentials evaluated. So some of our participants who had a degree in another country were trying to figure out, how do I get this evaluated so that I can continue working in that industry in the US. And so it worked out well that we had a connection at ISAC that was able to serve as a resource for a few of our participants, especially those that were trying to get their transcripts evaluated, that was able to help us meet that need. And then additional.
ISAC is Illinois Student Aid Commission. So
Yes, thank you, Tara. And then some additional supports that we identified was the need for that was needed for survivors to succeed in this program are things like access to wraparound support services like childcare and transportation or technology, as well as spending more time building that self-advocacy skills to prepare for navigating next steps on their career pathway.
And as Afrada mentioned, so along the way, we already had a partnership with ISAC, and even though they're not workforce or adult ed, they do service students who are trying to get into post-secondary education. We also developed a relationship with Upwardly Global. I always mix that up. Upwardly Global, is a program that helps immigrants who come from other countries get their transcripts evaluated, gives them one-on-one job coaching so that they can get back into either post-secondary or get into their career that they have when they were in their home countries. So some of the takeaways from our DV service provider, usually when we do this presentation, sometimes we actually have one of our partners do it with us, but they weren't able to come. So I'm going to take this over. So what we've heard from them is that, like Afrada mentioned, the goal setting component at the initial stages is very important, that they understand and recognize the purpose of the particular curriculum and what they're doing. And how it relates to them getting toward their goals of financial independence. They seem to, especially like I mentioned with the high immigrant population, they really were drawn toward those financial components of just learning, what credit means in the United States and how that works here in the United States. And, like we talked about, the relationship between training and education and earning potential. And so those are very, very valuable in those initial stages, so that they can regain that economic power through a career plan. So they need to know how they connected and how it made sense for them to do it. Every stage, every lesson, a lot of our partners, one of our most successful DV partners, talked about the importance of getting that feedback at every stage and having those conversations with them after, completing certain activities and how it was relatable to what their goals are. As well as a dedicated space, a safe space. We talked about that earlier. We found that with one of our partners, that dedicated safe space in the beginning, it helped them to bond and create kind of a support system for each other. So unfortunately, going to phase 2, they're not all going to phase 2 as a cohort because they had different needs, individual needs. And so phase 2 seemed a lot more frightened. They may have been a little more anxious going to phase 2 because now you're not in a cohort, but really, like Afrada said, you're advocating for yourself and you're going towards your own individual goals in that phase. And so it's been important at every stage, whether it's about the logistics or the speed of the course or how long it's going to take. So all of those things as far as planning, class discussions, keeping in mind that travel and childcare needs are very important. So when determining on how you want to present the program, it's important in the beginning. They mentioned talking to participants and asking them what's most convenient, virtual in person or a hybrid situation. And knowing that even if you want to offer it virtually, there is a component of digital literacy and making sure that they are digitally literate to actually do the hybrid situation and learning how to work Zoom and we're learning how to work, their computers and the basics of that. So all of those things were important. And a lot of times they wanted to spend more time talking about certain topics in the course than others. So being able to be flexible in that and pivot, because that may be the need of the particular cohort that you're working with.
So again, we love to share little snippets of qualitative data as well. So overall, participants shared really positive feedback about the experience. They had a lot of praise for their instructors, and they enjoyed the group setting that they had to discuss their aspirations with women who have had similar experiences. And they also shared that the program was helpful in paving the road for them to work towards their desired achievements. I really especially love the first quote up there that says, "Career Foundations planted the seed for me so that I could be able to grow in other areas." Someone else said that it was a huge transformation for their life, and that they enjoyed the group setting. So yeah, I'll pause and let you all take a minute to read what's on the screen, but it's just really empowering to be able to see how effective the curriculum was.
We also found that the instructor was very important. So the instructor, as you all know, was very important in the success of the experiences of the participants. And so, we get a lot of feedback as well on how great their instructors were during this process. And just to let you know, we originally created this curriculum, not the curriculum, but this particular pilot, because the interest is expanding it to other trauma impacted populations to see how that will work because of the same reasons. And so we're thinking about expanding it to maybe returning citizens or those who are just as impacted, as well as, populations of trauma, maybe veterans or those who are unhoused. So yeah, but once again, still keeping in mind what we've experienced here, because even when you talk about unhoused, what's the level of readiness that someone is kind of ready to embark on this particular pilot? All right, any questions? Thank you all for staying awake. Yeah, any questions you all have for us? And Friday, if you can check online to see if there are any questions. Yeah.
You had mentioned you're working with someone who is able to look into the immigrants and countries.
Their transcripts and making sure that, yeah.
Is that just global to Chicago?
No,
Like,
actually, Upwardly Global, we know, is a national organization. I actually just left a session before this at 2:00 that talked about that, helping immigrants and getting transcripts, and they actually have a whole list of resources. So check the Google website, because they sent out a Google Doc with a bunch of resources that'll help them get their transcripts translated and things like that. So yeah. I'm sorry?
Upwardly Global's here.
Yeah, I think they're here actually, yeah.
That's
So
crazy. It's so expensive.
it is.
Hundreds of dollars for places in our.
Yeah, we had other resources as well, but yes, they are expensive, and and so we did have one participant who actually was finishing up her master's degree, and she was trying to figure out her next steps because she had a hard time getting a job. And so because of Really Go, they don't just do the good part about their organization, they don't just translate the transcripts and, but they provide, like I said, that one-on-one coaching to help immigrants get to where they want to be in their career. So that's the great part about it. And they have several success stories. So check them out. Yeah. You had a question.
I was just going to ask, this is after the crisis phase. I'm wondering about if you had any feedback or the challenges that they had if they were back at home? Are they, or are they in a home outside? Because you're talking about safe spaces
Mhm.
for them.
So, yeah, so that's why we, like I said, we are not the experts, so we had our DV organizations choose the participants. And so from what we understand, most of the organizations chose participants who were out of their situations. But like Afrada mentioned, with the way things work with survivors, it could be any moment that they're back in, depending, and so we let them select the participants. They are the experts and they work with their counselors and things like that. And so the idea was for them to kind of select those who may be in a stable situation. Yeah. Yeah. And that we found was very important to this pilot. Any other questions? Sure. Sure.
You mentioned you were thinking about doing this with other populations.
Mhm.
You picked one of my passion projects, and that's working with the Consortium.
Mhm.
And it sounded like you were thinking about when they came out.
Yes.
You should contact your local jails and prisons and get in beforehand and give that, like, the guys that are, and women that are just about to be released.
Mhm.
Because that goal setting, start thinking about getting them excited about, look at the things you can accomplish once you get out and things on hope for them.
Yeah, so our consortium, those particular partners in the pilot, those were just a few. Our consortium is made up of 20 plus different organizations, and we try to make sure that those organizations represent different populations. And so we do have relationships with organizations that work with recidivism and returning citizens. And so the idea is, we have one that was a long time, because our consortium partners fluctuate throughout the years. And so we're trying to bring back a couple of organizations who do specifically work with them, because in the past, Career Foundations, like I said, it's been around since 2014, I want to say, maybe before I got there to the organization. But those particular organizations in the past have used Career Foundations in those situations. And so the goal would be maybe to, when you split the curriculum up, to do the phase one right before they leave, and then take that referral straight to that workforce organization with phase two. But again, the caveat to that is, as we know, when they come out, we want to make sure that they are in a stable situation.
Oh, that's.
I'm sure just like in other places in Chicago, it's not so easy for someone coming out of incarceration to get a home, to be in an environment where they have stable home. We don't want people who are couch surfing, because once again, if your basic needs aren't met, you're not thinking about what, you're thinking about tomorrow. You're not thinking about 3 years from now, what I want to do for a lifetime. So those things are definitely considered when you're talking about working with impacted populations, trauma impacted populations.
That's all you could do.
Yeah.
Population. So
Yeah.
exciting.
Yeah. Afrada, do we have any questions online from anyone?
No, I don't see anything in the Q&A box, and I'm also looking at Huba, and I don't see any questions there as well that we haven't already addressed. So
Or comments?
Nope.
Okay. So, if you want more information about our pilot, if you're interested in getting the final report, you can definitely contact myself or Afrada at careerpathways@womenemployed.org. Also, if you want a copy of the original Career Foundations curriculum, it is free to use. It's a curriculum that is used throughout the nation. We've had people outside of the country download the curriculum, but you can go to this link here or the QR code to scan it and get a copy for you to use in your organization. And although we don't require it from outside organizations, we always love the feedback. So if you do decide to use it, we would like to hear from you. There is a component within the curriculum, a link where you can provide feedback to us. And in the initial directions, once you see the intro page of the curriculum. So there is a way to provide feedback for us. And then lastly, Where did I get? I want to make sure I don't want to switch it. This is the important QR code. We always want feedback from our presentation. So it's a quick survey, Survey Monkey. I think it takes maybe 3 minutes. If you want to give us feedback on this particular curriculum, on this particular presentation, on how we can improve it and make it better, more interesting, especially if it's at the very end of the day after lunch. I had a whole thing planned, I'm telling you, but they told me 20, I was like 27 people. Wait, what? But this was nice and intimate and cozy. As they say, I know.
Yeah,
Especially the last one.
Oh, I know.
You guys, y'all were great.
yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you all.
really great.
And please, like I said, reach out if you have any questions or if you decide to use the curriculum and check it out. And just to let you know, the curriculum is also available in Spanish.
I have an agency we work with in one of my counties that I'm gonna have to share this with them because I could see them really, it's a PR support.
Okay,
And I could see that.
great. Thank you. Yeah, our focus, like I said, once we finish up with the pilot, we do want to try it. It won't be in a pilot situation, but we're recruiting other trauma impacted organizations who service certain populations to see if they want to join our consortium. Just to let you know, our consortium is also an internal referral process we have within the consortium. And so all of our partners agree and know that it's about collaboration and not competition. And so they joined the consortium agreeing that we're there to provide a continuum of care for all of their participants. So they know that if your organization doesn't provide something and you have a client who needs it, we have an internal referral process within the consortium that you can refer them to one of our partner organizations and they're not stealing your client, right? So it's a great process, so yeah.
And we have a very active reentry council and networking. I'm a chair and networking is top priority. So that when you're working with somebody and they have a problem you can't address, you know exactly what to send them to.
Yeah.
And you can make a call and say, hey, got somebody that needs your help and so anytime you can work with lots of people, it sounds like that's a wonderful
Yep.
way of doing it.
Yeah. Well, once again, thank you. We won't hold you. We'll give you a little bit of time back as well, 2 minutes. Thank you all for joining us.